Hey guys, hang on a second. I have to kind of confirm that I am actually really live. Beautiful. I always worry about that. Hang on. Now let me close this. Okay, perfect. All right. Hi guys, welcome. So I've had a couple of events where we actually the live didn't work, and so I always worry when we first get started. So hi, welcome everybody. My name is Rick Stone, and welcome to this workshop that we're going to be doing today. So this is the When to Plant Your Seedlings for Fall Harvest workshop, and I am super excited to have everybody here. This is the first of our year-round gardening workshops. We do these workshops every summer, end of June, 1st of July. We actually have 6 of them on the schedule, so that you guys are aware. We will be doing workshops every Friday for the next 3 Fridays, and then the week of July 10th, we'll be doing a workshop on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week. So we have a lot of stuff coming up. Somebody please let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm sure we'd be hearing by now if you couldn't, but if everything sounds okay, let me know. Welcome everybody, and while we're kind of waiting, we had about 300 people that pre-registered for this event. So let's maybe ask a question while we're waiting. Good, sounds good, great. Thank you guys for letting me know. So introduce yourselves. Tell me where you're from, what your garden zone is, and since we're talking about fall and winter gardening here, tell me how cold it gets in the wintertime in your area. What's your winter weather like, so that I kind of have an idea. And I'm going to actually shrink myself down here for a minute, and we'll kind of go through. So we're coming up on 100 people. I think once we get to about 100, we'll kind of get things underway. We're at 96 right now, so we're getting pretty close. Hi from Atlanta, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Zone 6B. That's the same as us. Alabama, West Virginia, Tennessee, Minnesota, New York. Wow, all over the place. Zone 8, pretty mild there. Baltimore, Wisconsin, France. Hi, Carolyn from France. Wisconsin. We've got Alabama, Arizona, Payson, Arizona, Missouri, New York, Kentucky. Okay, welcome guys, welcome. Great. All right, well, we are, I think, going to go ahead and get started, so that I want to honor your time as best as we can. Make sure that you hang around for the full broadcast. I do have a little bit of a free offer for you. We have our year-round gardening mini course, which is about a 45-minute long mini course where I teach you guys more about fall and winter gardening. And there's actually a link for that mini course down in the description of this video, and it's free. So this is a free mini course that you can sign up for. It gives you kind of a introduction to fall and winter gardening and some of the things that you can be doing with your fall and winter garden, really based on about anywhere you live. You can do some type of, especially fall gardening, in pretty much any zone. And winter gardening will get a little bit tough for those of you in zones 3 and 4. There are a few things that you can grow in zones 3 and 4 over the winter, but pretty much everybody is going to be able to benefit from this free little mini course. So there's a link in the description of this video that you can click on and go check that out. And you just sign up for it, and it's pretty simple to sign up for. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about seed starting for fall. And so in particular, we're going to be covering 4 different topics. We're going to talk about timing, when you should be starting your seedlings. For a lot of us, it's actually now, okay, or fairly soon. We're going to talk about the brassica family, which is the cabbage family crops. We're going to talk about a few other fall crops and when you should be starting those indoors. And then I'm going to do just a little tiny bit about using some hoop houses to extend your growing season, because sometimes, depending on where you live, when we plant these fall brassica family crops, they'll need a little bit of extra protection towards the end of their growing season, so that we can kind of keep them in good shape as we go through. So just a couple of things to maybe make sure that you're at the right place. We're up to 120 people, so welcome to everybody. This class is designed for people that are in zones 3 through 8, cold winter climates. And the main reason why I'm saying 3 through 8 is because we're going to base the planting times on your frost dates. And those of you that live in 9 and 10, sometimes you don't have frost dates. So you'll be able to learn some things here, but your planting is going to be at a completely different time of the year because you don't have frost impending. Or if you do, it's very little, like in zone 9. So the other thing that will be helpful for those of you that are here is if you can start some seeds indoors. So we're going to be talking about seedlings that we're going to be starting indoors and then transplanting out in our garden as the fall approaches, okay? I do have a little bit of an offer at the end, but I've actually already told you about it. It's the free mini course. So if that offends you, this probably isn't the right place for you either. But okay, so who am I? My name is Rick Stone, and I am the founder of the Gardening Academy, and I'm also the principal author over at the website Our Stony Acres. And we have also, back here, let me make this big so that you guys can see our cool new logo. We have our YouTube channel, which is Stony Acres Gardening. And my daughter made that logo, and my son did the woodwork on it. So I thought I would show it off because it's pretty cool. I'm sorry. Let me shrink myself back down here. Okay, I am a master gardener. I have been a master gardener since 2012. And we, meaning my wife and I, have been gardening for 25 plus years. This year is actually our 26th garden together as a couple. And before that, both our parents and our grandparents gardened. So we've got a lot of gardening experience and a lot of stuff to teach, hopefully. We personally have been doing season extension or year-round gardening is what I call it for, this will be our 2009. So this will be our 14th year that we have been doing fall and winter gardening as well. And we actually harvest all the way through the winter in our zone 6B garden. So we're in Utah, just south of Salt Lake City, and our garden zone is 6B, and we're able to garden all through the winter and fall months. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to go back. Let me talk just a little bit about what the format's going to be. So I've got about 15 or 20 minutes worth of stuff to teach you guys. Then we're going to announce the prize winners, and let me show you the prizes. So we've got 2 different prizes that we're giving away today. The first one is a 10-gallon Smart Pot. Thank you to Smart Pots for sponsoring this prize. So we've got a 10-gallon Smart Pot to give away. And then, I'm going to make myself big again for this one because this one's exciting. We are also giving away one of these, which is a Stony Acres Gardening Fall and Winter Seed Collection. And we've partnered with True Leaf Marketplace, and they put together the seed collection. I was actually able to go through and curate it. I chose all of the different varieties that are in here. There's 14 different seeds for you for fall and winter planting. These are particularly meant for planting directly out in the garden. So these are direct seeded plants. 14 different ones. We've got 4 root crops, 10 leafy greens, only $17 for this packet of 14 seeds. So this is a great little thing. But we're giving one of these away as well as one of the prizes today. So we'll do that about halfway through. Is what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and teach you guys a little bit about the fall seedlings and when we should be planting those. And then we'll do the prize drawing, and then I'll kind of open things up for questions. So while I'm teaching, it's really hard for me to follow the chat and focus on what I'm teaching. So I'm going to ignore the chat for a minute. My wife, AJ, is upstairs, and she is keeping track of any questions that you might have. So if you ask a question while I'm teaching, she'll keep track of that, and then I'll answer those when we get to the question and answer section towards the end. I'm hoping to get us all out of here within about 45 minutes or so, so that I kind of honor your time. All right, so let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use broccoli as the example kind of all the way through what we're talking about today, because that is one of my favorite fall crops to grow. And so we're going to use that as our example. And so there's a few things that I want to teach you first about fall crops, an important principle that you need to understand. So my favorite variety of broccoli is called Pac-Man. It's a hybrid variety, which I usually don't grow a lot of hybrid varieties of plants. Most of what I grow are heirlooms or open pollinated. But I grow Pac-Man broccoli because it has a very short maturity date, only 75 days, which is a whole month sooner than a lot of the more popular varieties of broccoli out there. So it matures quicker, which is important, especially in the fall. because we have a lot of funky stuff going on, okay? Now, when you're choosing the varieties that you are going to be planting for your fall garden, there's something that you need to keep in mind. Because the conditions are different at the fall, when we read on the back of a seed package that we have 75 days to harvest, that is based on spring planting, okay? And think about what the conditions in spring are. It's cooler, with the temperatures getting warmer as things go along, and the daylight and the day length are getting longer and longer as we go through the day, or as we go through the season. So we just a couple of days ago, we hit the longest day of the year. So all through the spring, we have this increasing sunlight. When we're talking about fall, we have the exact opposite thing happening. So temperatures are starting to drop, and then the daylight starts to drop off. And as we hit the end of, the middle to the end of September, we really start to see a pretty steep drop off on the length of our day. That means those both combined declining sun and declining temperatures means that we need to add some additional time to our maturity dates. So if your favorite broccoli, like mine, says it's going to mature in 75 days, in the fall, it's probably going to be more like 90 days. So we add 15 days to whatever we're planting in the fall because the sunlight is going down and the amount of time just increases. So that's one of the things that I want you to be very mindful of when you're choosing varieties that you're going to be planting in the fall. I love Watham broccoli. It's one of my favorites to grow, but I can't grow it in the fall because it has a maturity date of 110 days, which means it's 125 days to maturity. Planting that, it means that its maturity date is going to slide into January. That's not going to happen in Zone 6B, okay? So we need to choose varieties that are shorter on their maturity dates when we're doing this. So no, if you're choosing cabbage, none of the big Savoy cabbages. Instead, we want to go with like the acres, the red acre, the golden acre cabbages that have shorter maturity dates. Same with your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, anything that you're planting, we want those to be fairly short dates. Okay, so that's an important thing that you need to know as you are learning. The other thing that's very important for you to know is what your first frost date is. Okay, all of the planting times that we're going to be talking about today are based on your first frost date. And so you need to know. So if you don't know what your first frost date is, the best way to figure that out is to ask an experienced gardener in your area. They're going to know. Call your local extension agency or something like that. They're going to have a pretty good idea of what the last frost date is the first frost date in the fall, what your first frost date is. They'll have a pretty good idea. But if you don't have somebody like that in your life, then I do have a couple of solutions for you. There's 3 different websites, Morning Chores, Farmer's Almanac, and garden.org, that all have frost date calculators. I'm giving all 3 of them to you, and there's links in the description of the video to those websites. Giving all 3 of them to you because you're going to go put your zip code in, and each one of them is going to give you a different date. I'm not sure why that is. They're all choosing to pull from different databases. So I want you to get those 3, and that will give you a pretty good idea of what your date is. So for example, my first frost date in the fall is usually about October 1st. Sometimes it slides as late as about the 15th, but usually we're right around the 1st to the 5th is when our frost date is. And that's important to know because what we're going to be planting now is based on when that frost date is, okay? All right, so the brassica family are the main crops that we're going to be talking about today. And guys, I just happened to glance at the thing. I may have totally messed up and said last frost instead of first frost. So here we're talking about your first fall frost, okay? Just make sure that I reinforce that. I apologize. Brassica family is the cabbage family, okay? So in that family, we have broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, kohlrabi, collards, Brussels sprouts, and then the Asian greens. And so Asian greens are things like pak choy, bok choy, tatsoi, napa cabbage, things like that, okay? Those are the brassica family plants. And these are the ones that we want to be starting indoors now because we want to have some good, healthy starts to put out as fall is starting to approach, okay? So here is the calculation, and it's a little convoluted. And so I'm going to explain it to you. We want to base everything off of our first frost date, and we would like to be able to put seedlings out in the garden about 4 to 6 weeks before our first frost date in the fall, okay? The reason why we want seedlings is because when we're talking about the Brassica family, the maturity dates that we see on those seed packages that we have, those maturity dates are actually based on from transplant, not from seed. So we need to have transplants ready to go in the ground about 4 weeks before that first frost date, okay? Which means we want a nice 6 to 8 week old seedling that's ready to go in the ground at that time, okay? So we have to count back from our first frost date 12 to 14 weeks. And that's when we are going to be planting our Brassica family crops indoors, okay? So let's use my garden as an example. I think, yeah, I've got that right here. We'll use my garden as an example. So October 1st means that I am going to want to start putting my seedlings out somewhere between August 15th and September 1st. I'll be honest with you, most years it's September 1st because on August 15th, we're still pretty hot. And by September, we're usually cooled off well enough that those transplants are going to be okay. But we're targeting right around that somewhere between August 1st and August 15th and September 1st, okay? So that means if we then count back another 8 weeks from that date, then I need to be starting my Brassica family plants somewhere between June 15th and July 1st, right now, okay? So if I start my seedlings on July 1st, I'll have 8-week-old seedlings ready to go out in the garden on September 1st. That's why we're doing this workshop now, is because it's important for us to know that we got to get those things started now. If we want them to be able to mature on time and be ready for us to harvest, then we really, really, really need to get things going now, okay? So 12 weeks from your first frost date is the calculation. So if your first frost date is October 15th, then you're going to start somewhere between July 1st and July 15th. If your first frost date isn't until November 1st, then you're probably looking at about August 1st that you're going to be planting those. But we need to make that calculation. But for a lot of us that live in like zones 4, 5, 6, and some even in 7, that time is coming very soon when we need to be starting those seedlings indoors. So we're going to plant those seedlings indoors under lights, get them started, get them about 8 weeks old, and then we transplant them out into the garden just as fall is starting to happen and as the temperatures are starting to come down, okay? So that's your calculation, 12 weeks before. Now, there are a few other crops that we could also start indoors for fall harvest, okay? These are crops like lettuce. Kale is on both lists, I recognize. Swiss chard, spinach, Asian greens also, arugula, and endive, okay? All of these are leafy greens, and we could be starting those indoors. Why would we want to start those indoors? All of those plants actually do pretty well just direct seeded in the garden. But our target date for those planting out in the garden is about 6 to 8 weeks before our first frost date. Well, for me, that's August 1st. And think about what your garden looks like on August 1st. I have potatoes and tomatoes and squash vines sprawling all over and beans and peppers. All of my warm season crops are just really starting to come into production. And honestly, I don't have any space to put these kind of crops in at that time. I just don't have the space in my garden. So if instead I start those indoors, then they'll be 6 weeks old, about September 15th for me. And then I've harvested my potatoes. My tomatoes are starting to wind down. All of a sudden I have space so I can get those out in the garden then. So the calculation for those crops is plant them indoors 6 weeks before your last frost date, okay? Or if you have the space, you can plant all of these 7 outside if you have the space. But if you don't have the space, start them indoors, and then when the space frees up, you're able to get those out and planted and going, okay? So that is kind of the date calculations that we have. So looks like we're getting some questions here. I'll go ahead and we'll get to the questions here in just a minute. Let me talk really quickly about hoop houses. So I'm going to turn myself off so you can see this full picture and appreciate the coolness of a hoop house covered in snow. This is one of our hoop houses, and we like to have these, especially for those brassica family plants, because the fall weather gets pretty chaotic about the time that these plants start to mature. So if I'm planting them on September 1st, they're going to start maturing late October, early November is when they're actually going to start happening. Some years, that's great. We still have nice weather and things are doing really well. Other years, we're actually, getting pretty crazy weather by that time. And so it's very helpful to have a little mini hoop house that you can put up over those crops. That will help to protect them and let them kind of finish off the last of their growing and get them ready to harvest. Okay, so basically these hoop houses are just very simple hoops with inexpensive painter's plastic on top of them. So we don't need to get really fancy. That doesn't need to be greenhouse plastic. It doesn't need to be, anything terribly fancy. It doesn't even need to be like steel hoops or anything like that. We're just looking for something that can offer some protection from the cold and from the wind during that time of year. This is a look at one of my hoop houses with the cover off. And you can see we just use 1/2-inch PVC pipes that we bend in an arc. In this case, the PVC it's actually, we're doing this over a raised bed. But you can also do these if you don't have raised beds. You can also do these directly in your garden. The one thing that you do want to do is you want to add a ridge pole. So you can see along the top of those hoops, kind of the ribs of the hoop house, we have a ridge pole. In this case, we use some wood that we just screwed into those PVC pipes. You could actually just use another piece of PVC that you screw in. But the reason why we want that ridge pole is it makes the structure itself more rigid. And then we'll just cover it with a painter's plastic like you see here. And then it is ready to go. So you can cover that up. And I usually will just kind of attach it to the sides of the bed. And that is actually going to offer a lot of protection and help you to get finished with that crop. The other nice thing about hoop houses like this is that you can use those to really extend your season with your leafy greens as well, or even like carrots or turnips and beets and things like that. You can use those hoop houses to extend that season and that growing season. They'll add easily 6 to 8 weeks to the end of most people's growing season. If you live like in zone 7 or 8, you'll be able to garden inside a hoop house all winter long. If you live a little bit colder than that, like 6.543, you'll probably want to have a cold frame instead. And I actually will be talking about cold frames in one of the other workshops that we're going to be doing a little bit later on. So simple hoop house is something that is going to be very beneficial to you as you try to do this year-round gardening whole thing. And it's really going to help you out in the fall. Okay, so there you go. And it looks like I kept it to about 15 minutes, which is what I was shooting for. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to go through and really quick, I've got some resources for you to help you along, and then we'll do the prize drawing, and then I'll take as much time as we need. I want to keep it reasonable, maybe get us to another 20 or 25 minutes worth of time to answer your questions. So AJ's already got, it looks like 4 or 5 questions for us already. So we'll kind of go through there. Don't forget, if you want to learn more about year-round gardening, there's a free mini course that you can sign up for. Link is down in the description of this video. Also, just so that you know, coming up, we do have our year-round gardening master course, which is actually a paid course. The cost this year is $79. It has 5.5 hours worth of instruction. We do weekly study guides for the first 4 weeks of the course. We do Q&A sessions for the first 4 weeks of the course as well. And we have a private Facebook group. And the Q&A sessions are different than these. We actually do those on Zoom so that you and I can interact and we can actually, talk about those. That course will be open July 10th through the 17th, just so that you guys know and you've got it on your radar. So there you go. A few resources for you to help you out a little bit more. A year-round gardening mini course we've already talked about. There's a link in the description for that. If you need a little help with your seed starting, we've got a free ebook that you can use. AJ put that together, and it's a great little book. And there's a link for that down in the description of the video as well. And then if you're interested in that fall and winter seed collection, there's a link for that. And then if you really would like to dig into seed starting and you want to learn how to do that, we do have a Seed Starting Simplified course. There's a link down below for that one as well. And that is a $50 course that is actually in the process of being updated. We're upgrading it. I just finished refilming all of that course, and we're going to be upgrading that. So if you buy it now, you'll actually get the upgraded version of the course, okay? All right, so let's announce our prize winners. So here we go. So prize winners for this workshop are the seed collection goes to Cindy C, and the Smart Pot goes to Holly M. Okay, so Cindy and Holly, I have your emails. Is what I did, guys, is we had 355 people that entered to win. I put everybody into a spreadsheet, assigned a number to everybody's name, and then used a random number generator to spit out Cindy and Holly. And they're the winners for this time. Cindy and Holly, I will email you and ask for your mailing address. So it'll have to be, to make sure that I'm getting the right person, I will email you first, and then you can email your mailing address to me, and we'll get those in the mail to you. Okay? So congratulations to both Cindy and Holly. And if you guys are interested in entering more prize drawings, we're going to be doing a prize drawing like this one, including the seed collection for every one of these workshops that we're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks. So we will be doing that as well. Let me see if I've got any more. Okay, so we're ready to move on to our questions. So, all right, I'm going to take a drink really quick. I've been talking for 26 minutes. Takes a minute. And let's relax, and we will go through some questions. All right, so let's see. And again, thank you to AJ, my wife, who is upstairs, making sure that all of this is going to run quickly and efficiently. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and post those, and AJ will pop them over onto my spreadsheet here so that I can get them answered to you. So first question, I'm gonna actually ask you guys a question. What do you think of the idea of growing in the fall? It's something that's new for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't recognize that you can have an entire fall garden, and then you can even extend that garden into the winter. And that's the thing that's fun for me. We use cold frames to grow things like spinach and carrots and lettuce all the way through the winter, and you can do that even in some of the colder zones. There are some plants that are hardy enough that you can harvest all winter, assuming you can get to your cold frames if they're not buried in snow. So it's a fun thing, and I would love to hear what you guys think about that. So let me know in the comments as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer some questions. So Star, hi Star, by the way, and Star is a member of our Gardening Academy, which is fun. Star wants to know if this would also include broccoli rabe. Yes, and I probably should have put that on the slide. I'll try and remember to do that for next year's. But yes, that would include broccoli rabe as well. That's part of the cabbage family, and so it definitely would. Little Country Kitchen says, please tell us where to get the seeds like Pac-Man. Okay, so Pac-Man is a little bit hard to get. I'm trying to get True Leaf Market to get it in. We'll see if I can manage that. If you Google Pac-Man broccoli seeds, there are 2 or 3 different places out there that have them available. They come usually in packages of about 150, and if you take care of your seeds, that should last you for a lot of years. My little package of 150 seeds will last 5+ years. And so just for Pac-Man seeds, just Google that, and there are several different places. I can't remember. It was just a little seed shop that I found mine at. And it was just last year that I got them, but I can't remember the name of it. So just Google it, and you should be able to find Pac-Man. I've actually even seen Pac-Man on Amazon. I sometimes question whether I should buy seeds from Amazon. So, but I have seen it on Amazon as well. Okay, let's see. Nicole says, can you not direct sow them because it would be too hot out? Yes, that's exactly right, Nicole. So this time of year, so for example, for me, I would need to plant broccoli now outside. Well, we're just moving into the 80s and 90s, and over the next 6 weeks, we're going to see, like last year, in July and August, we had like 25 days over 100 degrees last year. Hoping we don't get that this year, but I'm sure we'll see, at least a dozen days over 100 degrees this year. That's way too hot for the cabbage family right now. So they're not going to do well. They're going to immediately want to bolt to seed as soon as they get established. And so the reason why we do these indoors is because we can provide them with a relatively normal growing environment for them. Those crops like to grow at about 70, 75 degrees. That's what the temperature most of our houses are at most of the time during the day. And so it has to be grown inside. It just has to be because it's so hot outside right now. Okay. Sophia says, instead of starting indoors, can you put them in a pop-out greenhouse? No, for the same reason, because it's going to be too hot outside. And so we want to make sure that we are actually keeping them cooler. All of those cool season crops, like the broccoli family, like to grow in temperatures below 80 degrees, preferably around 75 to 65 degrees. And so starting those seedlings outside in a greenhouse is not going to be the best environment for them. They're not going to do well out there. Okay. Frog in Progress. That's a cool name. We use dollar store hula hoops, and the plastic mattress was vacuum sealed for our hula hoops last year, and a length of bamboo for the ridgepole, and it worked great until a tree fell on it. So yeah, it's pretty easy to improvise a hoop house, and it's pretty amazing how those simple hoop houses are going to just provide a ton of protection. So just a little layer of plastic that limits the wind, that helps to kind of create a greenhouse environment, is going to make a huge difference with those crops in the late part of the season. What was the third website for frost dates? That one's called garden.org. And I think I included that in the link in the description. Can I grow broccoli and cabbage under lights from seed to harvest indoors? I was gifted new lights, and I plan to try tomatoes all year indoors in our house. It's 75 degrees in my grow room. Yeah, you definitely could. My personal opinion is I would if I had grow lights, I would probably rather do tomatoes and peppers and things like that and use that space for those. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, there isn't any reason why you couldn't grow broccoli and cabbage to maturity. Those are big plants, though, so they are going to take up a lot of space under those lights. And where, like a tomato or a pepper plant, you could get a smaller tomato, like a patio tomato or something like that, and pepper plants don't get all that large. Cabbage plants get really big. And so and so do broccoli plants. And broccoli not maybe quite as big as cabbage, but cabbage and broccoli get quite large. Cauliflower does as well. I might save that space for other things and still plant those outside. But you could definitely use those lights to get started, get your seedlings started as well. Little Country Kitchen says, I love the idea of growing in the fall, but by then I'm so exhausted. How do you keep yourself motivated and not burned out? Good question. And honestly, there are years when we do better in the fall than others. Last year was a bit of a struggle. We had a really rough gardening season and rough year. We did get some crops in for the fall. We had carrots, we had some lettuce. Our spinach crop failed last year for the first time in 14 years. But we did still get some fall crops in. Part of the way you defeat the motivation issue is by getting started now. So if you get that broccoli planted now, that gives you more motivation because you've got those little babies that you need to get out in the garden and take care of. So, getting started and planning in advance. Honestly, if you plan in advance and make the space and everything, it's really not that hard. Fall gardening becomes fairly simple. For me, we start seeing more rain starting in October, and so I don't have to water anymore. The weeds slow down, and so really we've got a little bit of effort in August and September, which we're already doing stuff in the garden anyways that time. If we get it established, then by October, November, when harvest time shows up, all we have to do is harvest. There isn't any extra work involved. And so honestly, for me, fall and winter are really good times to grow because there's less to do. The temperatures are cooler, you don't have to water as much, and we're talking about relatively simple crops, lettuces and spinaches and broccoli and cabbage. They're not as intense as tomatoes and peppers and potatoes and things like that. So I think you might find that a fall garden is actually quite easy to do and pleasant to do. Okay. Monique says she was listening to your video about fall seed starting last night, and I don't remember you saying it today. Yes, I didn't mention that. It is often hard. So she's saying maybe it's hard to find starts in stores for the fall. And yes, that is definitely the case, which is why I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Part of the reason why we want to be starting them indoors ourselves right now is because most of the nurseries don't, most people don't garden in the fall. And so most of the nurseries don't bring in fall starts. We do have a couple of places here in Salt Lake City that will bring in some broccoli and some cabbage. The problem is they don't understand the timing. And so those broccoli and cabbage starts show up in middle to late September. That's too late. They needed to have been in a month sooner than that. And so that's another part of the problem, and which is part of the reason why I prefer to actually grow those starts myself, because it's really hard to find those seedlings at nurseries in any significant quantity anyways. The one place that we bought from one year literally had like 8 plants, and I had to call and ask them to bring them in. So that is a little bit tough. Okay, Wesley is saying, what are you to do every year? I'm in zone 9B. So yes, 9B, you ought to be able to do this all through the winter, even without protection. Your planting and timing is going to be different because your hot season doesn't end until like November. So for most people that live in like Southern California, Florida, you're going to want those seedlings to be ready to go out kind of mid-November-ish, so that they're growing up in November, December, and January, and early February. Your cool time of the year is what you're targeting. It's harder for me to tell people in those zones when to plant because we don't have the frost date as a target. But for you guys, you're going to want those seedlings to be ready just as the weather is starting to cool in November and December, so that they grow up in the cool time of the year. They need temperatures that are between 60 and 75 degrees. So think about when your temperatures are like that, and that's when you're going to be trying to get those guys ready. Okay. L40 Wildflowers, explain your favorite cold frame, please, and how to make one. I actually have a video on my cold frames, so if you just want to go over to my channel, you can check that out, and you'll actually be able to see pictures, etc. So we made our own cold frames. They are 4 by 8 foot, and they just sit on top of our garden beds. And not our raised beds, but just in the garden itself. They sit in the garden itself, and so I plant based on where those are going to be. And then when the frosty weather starts to come, we put those out. They're 4 by 8 foot. They are 12 inches in the back, 8 inches in the front, so they slope, and they're made out of wood. And then we have created plexiglass lids that go on the top of them. And but you don't have to build your own lids. You could use old storm doors or old storm windows, things like that as well. So basically, I'm all for using what you've got. And so just create, if you've got an old storm door, build a frame that fits that door, that you can put that door on top of. Make sure that it's got a little bit of a slope to it. Mine, again, it's 12 inches in the back, 8 inches in the front. That gives it a pretty good slope. That will help the water to run off. It also helps the sun to get in a little bit better. But that's my favorite. And you can see, like I say, if you go to my channel, you can search there. And there's a video on my cold frames and shows that. Or you can come, the master course, I actually go through step by step on how to build one. So when we do the year-end master course in July, you could check that out. Okay. All right, hang on here. Holly is saying, "Oh, Holly, you're our winner." this is Holly. That was you. So Holly is asking, how long can you hold starts in the house under lights? Often and still, it's still brutally hot here in Atlanta into September. Okay, so in Atlanta, I actually am a little bit familiar with Atlanta because my daughter and her husband lived there for a couple of years while they were going to school. Um, you're probably, I think, zone 8 there, and you're right. You're going to want to be a little bit later in the season for you. So, but also keep in mind what we want. I recognize that it's hot when we're putting these out. You know, even for me, when I put mine out on September 1st, we're still solidly in the 80s. You know, we're still seeing, you know, lots of 80-degree days. Those plants are going to struggle a little bit at first until they get established. But the point is we need to get them in so that they will grow and they'll start maturing when the weather cools off. So we want them to mature when the temperatures are 60 to 75 degrees. That's what we're targeting. So just keep that in mind as you're planning your planting times. Okay. Star's asking again, what's the name of the 75-day broccoli? That's called Pac-Man. There are other varieties out there as well. Oh, what is the one? I'm trying to think. If I had my seed box here, I could pull it out because I tried it a couple of years ago. Shoot. There's 2 or 3 other 75-day varieties. I just happen to love Pac-Man. We picked it up years ago from a company called Mountain Valley Seeds, which now has become True Leaf Market. And they just have grown really well for us in our environment because they're kind of short seasons. So, but there are several other 75-day ones there. Carl is asking, will a garage be too hot for seed starting? Maybe. I know that's not the answer you were looking for. We used to grow our seedlings in our garage, and they did okay. You know, our fall seedlings did okay in our garage. It's definitely there's a time where the garage becomes cooler than it is outside. And so, it will definitely be cooler in your garage. If it's insulated, that would help. Our garage gets into the high to mid 80s sometimes in the summertime. That's a little bit hot, but ours did okay. We put a fan on them and they did all right. So a garage will be okay. Probably not the best, but it would be all right. Like I say, for several years, we had ours out in the garage. Now ours are in a spare bedroom, which is nice because we've got spare bedrooms now. Our kids have grown up and are all moving out. So, but a garage would be all right if that's the only solution that you have. A basement might be better, or a bedroom, something like that. But a garage would be okay because at least they're not exposed to the hot winds and the hot booming sunshine. It's just the temperatures that they're feeling there. So, okay. Stacy is asking, there are cabbage varieties that are shorter than 75 days. Should we wait to start or start those at the same time? So Stacy, I would start those at the same time. That the sooner, and again, that's why I mentioned those shorter varieties. We want those smaller cabbages in the fall because we're going to struggle with that dropping daylight and running out of time before the really cold weather gets here. And so I would say go ahead and get those going because they're going to end up maturing. Even if they're 60-day maturity, those are going to end up being 75-day. Which, if you planted those on September 1st, that's going to put them maturing in mid-November anyways. So by then your temperatures are going to cool off, and that's what we want. How many hours should you keep the seedlings under grow lights? Good question. It depends on the grow light. But if you're using just simple shop lights, then it needs to be about 16 hours. I would say with a regular grow light, I would probably keep them on for at least 12 hours and see how they do. If they don't seem to be thriving, then maybe increase the time a little bit. Your manufacturer may be able to help you with that as well, because it's hard for me to tell you that with grow lights because every grow light is different. But normally I go for 16 hours, but I use shop lights. So we just have simple LED shop lights that we use. So we go for 16 hours on those. Let's see, Nicole, when you're sowing carrots, when are you sowing carrots since they must be direct sown? Okay, so that's a great question. That's actually one of the things that we'll address in one of the other workshops, but I'll tell you right now. So for us, we do carrots 8 weeks before our first frost date, and then we do them again about 6 weeks before our first frost date. So we've got 2 plantings, and that is a very hard time of year to get carrots started, but it's worth it. So you're going to have to baby them. We cover them with burlap. We water them at least once a day, every day, until they get up and get established, but it's definitely worth it. So for us, we're planting those about August 1st is when we put our first planting of fall carrots in. The nice thing is about it is that August 1st planting lasts us until March. So we cover them with a cold frame and we harvest those until the weather starts to warm up in the spring. And they taste amazing that time of the year. So it's really well worth it. Are your watering requirements different in the fall than they are in the spring? Depends on what your weather's like. Our weather is not as rainy in the fall, and so early fall, so August, September, we're watering just like we would be, a regular a regular summer garden. But as fall progresses, light levels come down, the plants slow down in their growth, the water demands are a little bit less. You'll probably start to have storms coming in. For winter gardening, we actually stop watering our garden about November 1st. We'll usually, the last 2 or 3 rainstorms before November 1st, we'll leave the lids off of our cold frames, let them get watered really well, and then we're done watering from about November 1st to November 15th, somewhere in that zone, until middle of March. We don't have to water at all. So for a winter garden and a late fall garden, there's not a lot of watering involved at all. When we're talking about September and early October, you're still needing to do some watering at that time frame. Okay. Nicole, where are we at? We're at 46 minutes. I'll keep going for a bit. We've got a few more questions here. Nicole, when you cover your fall garden with whatever you're using for protection, what do you do for watering if the water can't get through? So again, you don't put the protection on until the cold weather starts arriving. So, broccoli can handle, or, any of those crops can handle a little bit of frost. So, if we've got a night that's going to get down to 32 degrees, I may not do anything, or I may just go throw a fabric row cover over it. We kind of wait until the colder weather, till it looks like the really cold weather is going to start settling in. Once it starts getting below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, then we'll put the cover out. And then at that time, by then, our water, we have secondary water, that's been shut off anyways. And so we don't have our regular garden watering system. And so I'll just hand water. So I just have a hose that I just string out to the garden, and I'll hand water every few days. Again, in the fall, by the time we reach that point, water demands are a lot less, and we're watering once a week or maybe once every 5 days. And so I'll just take, I've got a wand that's on the end of a hose, and I'll just go out and water by hand during that time. Open it up and water. Does broccoli have big or small roots? Wondering if I can put them in containers. Absolutely, you can put them in containers. They'll do well in containers. I would probably say that one broccoli plant should be in about a 5-gallon container. So this, for example, I don't know if you guys will be able to tell scale. This is a 10-gallon container. And this would be more than you needed for a broccoli plant. A 5-gallon container would be, appropriate for a broccoli plant. The roots do get pretty big, but a 5-gallon should be enough for a broccoli plant, okay? Can you grow turnips in the fall and beets? Absolutely, yes. In fact, shameless plug, we have turnips and beets in this mix. So we have turnips, beets, radishes, and carrots in this seed collection. So yes, definitely you can grow both of those, and they'll actually survive well into the early part of the winter months. We were harvesting beets last year in December, and you can do the same with turnips as well. Carrots will actually go all the way through the winter. Beets and turnips, not quite as much. They're not quite as hardy, but definitely in the fall you can plant those 8 weeks before your first frost date, and you'll be harvesting those, in October, November, December, no problem. So no problem at all with that. CJ, the preparing prepper, asks, Zone 6A, B, in New York, what should be my starting time for the fall garden, and when should I start the seeds inside? Okay, CJ, it's more important than your zone. It's your frost dates. So you need to figure out when those frost dates are. I'm assuming, since you're 6B, that they're relatively close to the same as mine. But I say that, and then somebody's going to say, but zones don't determine frost dates. And you're right, they don't. But if you're in zone 6B, that's pretty similar to me. You're probably somewhere in the October 1st to October 15th date range for your first frost date. And so you're going to you need to find that frost date out, and that's what you base your planting on. Your zone is not as important as the frost date. Okay. Moria. Moria? I apologize. I probably totally blew that name. Should we plant in the fall in full sun, knowing that they will suffer from heat, or should we plant in part shade, thinking peas, beets, etc.? Zone 5B. You're going to want to get as much sun to those as you possibly can, and so you do need to plant them in areas that will be full sun later on in the fall. And I know that's a little bit of a struggle early on, but that's what you should do. If it's a big problem in your area, you could get some shade cloth, maybe like a 40-50% shade cloth that you could put up on those really hot days to kind of help moderate that a little bit. But you want full sun later. You're going to need that later when those plants start to mature. So my garden is basically all full sun except for a couple of my raised beds, and so yeah, everything kind of just gets that full sun, and that's really the best for it. Larissa says, do you recommend winter sowing for fall crops? My understanding of winter sowing is when you're like using milk jugs to plant things early in the winter months, and so I'm not sure, Larissa, how that applies to fall crops. If you want to email me, it's rick@ourstonyacres.com. We could have an additional discussion about that. I'm not 100% sure I'm following your question on that. So any difference in the hardening off process for the fall? Usually you're going to want to do about a 10-day harden that time of year, because you're going to be planting when it's pretty hot. As the fall progresses, if you've got more seedlings to go out, you may be able to shorten that hardening time frame a little bit as the weather starts to cool off. But you're going to have a pretty dramatic difference. You're going to be taking those broccoli starts from 70-degree house to a 90-degree garden. That takes some hardening off. So you are going to have to really give them an extended hardening off period. So include that in your thinking as you're putting that together. So if you're thinking you're going to plant on September 1st, start hardening those seedlings off about a week before, so that you can get them in the garden, because that is a rough time of the year on those seedlings to begin with. The other thing that I love, an old gardener that ran a nursery that I know, he would say, when you're planting for the fall, dig your hole and then fill that hole full of water and let the water soak down, then plant, so that those roots have plenty of water to begin with, and then water them in again afterwards. So, but you definitely want to make sure that you are letting those harden. Shop light requirements. What shop light requirements do I suggest? This is Kathy. So I just use some simple LED shop lights. We also have one set of fluorescent lights that we've had for a lot of years. We started out with all fluorescent lights 20 years ago. Those have finally kind of given out on us. We only have 2 of the 6 that we had left. So we have one set of fluorescent lights, and then we have 2 sets of LED shop lights, and those are 4,000 lume LED shop lights, and things are doing well under those. They have higher lume lights than that. You can get a 5,000. I've even seen 10,000s lume lights. Those get a little bit more pricey. The 4,000 lume shop lights, I picked them up at one of the 2 big major Home Depot or Lowe's places. I can't remember which, but they were only $29 a piece. So very inexpensive, and my starts are doing really well. The key is you have to get them down close. So you have to get those lights down close to the plants, about an inch to 2 inches away, and that will do really well. But those shop lights are a really inexpensive way to get started with seed starting, because you don't have to spend $300 on a grow light. You can, $300 will get you 4 or 5 shelves worth of lights. So, okay, we are getting, we're down to 146 people. We're up at 55 minutes. I've got 3 or 4 more questions here. So let's kind of hold off on, it looks like lung family. Let's call that's the last question, so that we can kind of get out of here. We've been going for an hour. I don't want to go much longer than that, so that you guys can get on to the rest of your day. So I've got 3 more to do. Barbara is asking, can you leave plants in the cold before the last frost in above ground gardens, and how deep should they be? Yes, you can. So I'm assuming above ground, you're meaning like some type of raised bed garden. Your plants are not going to last as long in those gardens. If there's a way for the air to circulate underneath them, then that means your soil is going to freeze faster. But you could still definitely, do that. It's not until the real intense cold, once we're into the 30s, that's when you're going to start to have problems. If we're talking about raised beds, you should be able to do most things that we've talked about in a raised bed garden that's still in contact with the ground but is up higher. You should, be able to cover those with a cold frame or a hoop house and have pretty good success. Maybe not quite as much protection as if you were in ground garden, but pretty close. We've had good luck with those. Carl is asking, would you recommend an incandescent Christmas light in a hoop house for plants during the winter? No, they don't need it. The idea is we need to get, and that's part of the reason why we plant so soon, is we need to get those plants to maturity before the light levels come down. Okay, before the sunlight levels come down. We have what's called the Parsippany months. That's the 3 months of winter when the daylight hours drop below 10 hours. And during those 3 months, the plants actually don't do a lot of growing, and all we're doing is protecting them for harvest. And so adding additional light really, isn't all that beneficial. You're just burning energy, and it's not really going to help your plants much. So I just use the hoop house and plant the right crops, and that's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, is what crops you should be planting, and you'll do fine. Okay. All right. And then lung family question: how many days before should I bring the seedlings outside to get them used to the outside? So that's what we were just talking about earlier with hardening off. 7 to 10 days depends on how severe I always base it on how severe the difference is between where they've been growing and what the conditions are outside. So if they've been growing in 70-degree temperatures inside and it's 85 degrees outside, that's a pretty big swing. And so I'm going to harden them off longer in that case. If they're growing in 70-degree temperatures and it's 75 outside, that's not that big of a deal. And so you can probably harden them shorter for that time frame. Okay. All right, my friends, thank you. This has been good. Lots of excellent questions. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of reminders. Check the resources down in the description. I would love it if you guys signed up for that free mini course, 45 minutes long. It'll actually give you a lot more information about some of the things that we talked about today. And that's all of this, again, is in preparation for our year-round gardening master course, which will go on sale on July 10th. So that is coming up. And then again, if you need specific seed starting resources, I've got a ton of stuff, but the ebook is a great place to start, and we've got a course on that as well. So go and check all of that out. And this was a great workshop, guys. Thank you for being here. So many people still. We've got 138 people still here. That's awesome. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. We are going to do another workshop next week about beating the heat in the garden. So we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use both in the fall and even now in the summertime to beat the heat, how we can keep our gardens doing well when it's really hot outside. So that's what next week's workshop will be. Same time, 1:30. I'll have all the information posted on that here before the end of the day today. I'll get that all ready and ready to go. We'll have another prize drawing, so I'll have a page where you can sign up. If you signed up for this one, that puts you, the prize drawing, that puts you on my email list. If you go sign up for the prize drawing again, it doesn't put you on the email list a second time. It just adds you to the new prize drawing. So don't feel like you're going to get like double emails or anything like that. So we'll have that up. I'll have that up here in just the next 2 or 3 hours for next week's workshop. So we'll be doing that again Friday at 1:30 next week. Okay, that, my friends, is it. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate all your questions and all your support. We'll talk to you guys later. Happy gardening.